Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and this week we got a crash course on how to get your community to go from loving you to hating you in just a few days. This is the biggest Helldivers 2 controversy since launch, and I don't see how they're going to pull out of this nosedive. Also this week we had the Diablo 4 dev update and subsequent Season 4 patch notes, which snuck in even more great changes for the game that I was surprised to see. We'll go over those details. We'll also talk about the giant patch for No Rest for the Wicked that just released, which brought awesome changes while also killing off meta builds. But first, some rapid-fire news. We learned this week that Shadow of the Erdtree will be Elden Ring's first and last expansion, as per its game director. As a reminder, that releases on June 21st. Publisher Take-Two Interactive has shut down a couple of studios, including Intercept Games, which had been working on Kerbal Space Program 2, which released to mixed reviews last year and was slowly being improved. Not anymore, I guess. Award-winning spec fic novelist Christie Golden recently revealed that she was part of the Blizzard layoffs in January. Golden had published her first World of Warcraft novel back in 2001, and what a great novel. It was Lord of the Clans, I loved it, and she went on to write many novels for Blizzard after that, mostly for World of Warcraft. And in 2017, she was hired by Blizzard to be part of their story and franchise development team. It's really sad to see her go, and as a reminder, these layoffs were planned by Activision before the Microsoft takeover. Just a final screw you from Bobby K on his way out. Then, medieval city builder and strategy game hybrid Manor Lords released into early access on Steam last week, and has been doing really well. Very positive reviews on Steam, reaching an all-time concurrent player peak of 173,000. and 1 million sales within a day. The publisher has said the game's success is well beyond what they could have hoped, and they promise that they'll run 25% discounts pretty often. So no one should feel pressured to buy the game now. Weird to see a good guy publisher. Now onto some bad guy publisher news. The big controversy of the week. Sony has mandated that Helldivers 2 PC players will be forced to link their Steam accounts to a PlayStation Network account in order to keep playing. Sony, the company that has seen half a dozen data breaches over the past decade, wants your personal data. And that's actually the perfect lead-in to a word from today's sponsor, Incogni. You ever wonder how you get spam calls, texts, or emails? It's because thousands of companies are collecting, aggregating, and trading your personal data. And it's all legal. However, you have the right to demand that a data broker deletes whatever personal information they may have about you. Realistically though, for you to track down and contact all the companies to make that request, it's just not reasonable. That's where Incogni comes in. It's a service that does all of that for you. And you'd be surprised at how much of your personal info may be out there. Not just your full name, your email, your phone number, but also things like your employment history, your home address, possibly even your social security number. Here's my dashboard. You can see that I've got 4 requests left in progress and 59 have been completed. I've been using Incogni for about a year now after I've been getting a lot of spam texts. I don't know what started it. I don't know if it's because I had signed up for some store's loyalty card or something. There was also a big data breach on LinkedIn a while ago. There was like hundreds of millions of its users had their data scraped and sold on the dark web. But I know after using Incogni, now that I think back on how frustrating the situation was a year ago, I barely get any spam messages anymore. So take back your data, stop the spam, go to incogni.com/Rhykker and use code Rhykker to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/RHYKKER and use code Rhykker or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. So a PlayStation account will be required to play Helldivers 2. And the only reason this wasn't the case since launch was allegedly technical errors. Now, they claim that account linking plays a critical role in protecting players, but I don't know about you folks. I think we've been just fine for the past couple of months. As of May 6th, all new Helldivers 2 players will be required to connect their Steam account to a PSN account. And existing Steam players will have a grace period lasting until June 4th, after which you presumably won't be able to play anymore if you don't link your Steam account to a PSN account. Now, some people, especially those who already have a PSN account, may say, what's the big deal? Others may even point out how on the Steam page for Helldivers 2, it explicitly says that a PSN account is required to play the game, even though it's not in a super obvious place. Well, here's the thing. First, it's inconvenient and annoying to have to do this. We are PC gamers. Why do we need a PlayStation account? Why go through this extra layer of hassle for zero benefit to us? Second, you pull this on us like 2 months after the launch of the game, once we are well past the Steam refund window, and we've already become fans of the game and, don't want to just have to leave it. Had it been made clearer from the start that we'd have to do this, some people would have never bought the game to begin with. Third, some people don't want to give their data to Sony. Pure and simple. Fourth, something like 2/3 of countries in the world don't even have access to the PlayStation Network. They literally cannot make a PSN account. Yet Steam allowed them to buy the game. So in other words, someone in some country can't make a PSN account, has bought the game, he's beyond his refund window. Now what happens? Now for my points 3 and 4, you may say, well, just use fake information if you have a problem with that. And when you create your PSN profile, and if you're in a country that doesn't support the PlayStation Network, just run it through a VPN and use a different IP from a different country. Okay, sure. Do things that are literally against Sony's terms of service and can lead to your PSN account being banned and therefore losing access to the game. Sure, let's do that. The fact is that Helldivers 2 will lose players over this. How many? I don't know, but they will lose players. And the devs are sadly caught in the crossfire here between the players and Sony. Community manager Twinbeard said on Discord in response to a question about regions where PSN is unavailable, first of all, it's Sony's decision, not ours. Secondly, we don't have all the details about region-related issues yet. We're chasing Sony to get more info. When someone pushed back and implied that the developers, Arrowhead, did have some say in this and could have pushed back, he added, "If you believe that, you don't really understand how big partnerships work. Sony owns the Helldivers IP. Of course we have input and something to say, but it's part of a much wider discussion. This is not an argument of what to have for dinner." In other words, they might have some negotiating power in some places, but some things are just non-negotiable. And when Sony is your publisher, running your game through the PSN is probably a non-negotiable. But while Twinbeard remained relatively diplomatic here, Associate Community Manager Spitz was being a spitfire. He said on the Discord, quote, "It's not like this is the first or even the 14th mainstream game to require a third-party account that takes a couple of minutes to create. But if it's a deal breaker to have to take 120 seconds out of your day to enter an email and password and then forget about it, change your Steam review and make your displeasure known on a platform where it matters." And that's exactly what people did. A flood of negative reviews have hit the game on Steam. Over 50,000 negative reviews have come in the span of a day, bringing the game's recent review score down to mostly negative, with only 39% of the recent reviews being positive as of this recording, and lowering the overall reviews down to just mostly positive, only 70% of the reviews being positive now. Even if this issue is somehow made right, I don't think this game will ever recover from this stain in its review scores, which is really a shame. Then in response to a comment saying that this will kill Helldivers 2 on Steam, Spitz replied, "I thought you were refunding and leaving." Yeah, overall Spitz needs to reel it in a bit. Read the room. Meanwhile, CEO Pilestead tweeted, quote, "Ouch, right in the review score. Well, I guess it's warranted. Sorry everyone for how this all transpired. I hope we will make it up and regain the trust by providing a continued great game experience. I just want to make great games." You can tell the team is not happy with Sony's decision here. In all their communications, they're basically treading the line of directly saying, blame Sony for this mess. And maybe worst of all is that Sony has changed its website in response to this mess, because this website previously said that you don't need a PSN account to play a PlayStation game on PC. But after the backlash, they've sneakily modified that sentence to say some PlayStation games may require you to sign in and link to an account for PSN. Thankfully, Web Archive has records of what it previously looked like. Even the Helldivers FAQ on the Sony website says, "No, you currently do not need a PSN account to enjoy PlayStation Studios games on PC, but you will need a Steam account to redeem your voucher code." So could you really blame people for not realizing that you need a PSN account linked to your Steam account when there's literally conflicting information? Also, nowhere in the Helldivers end-user license agreement does it mention needing a PSN account. Although the EULA does state that they're allowed to change the EULA at any time for any reason, so whatever that's worth. Now, here's the thing. According to industry analyst Matt Piscatella, Helldivers 2 is the best-selling premium game of 2024 year to date, and it ranks 7th in lifetime US dollar sales for Sony-published titles. Now, I believe part of the success was due to its consumer-friendly price point at $40. It's almost half of what a AAA title runs you these days. And I think gamers are just getting increasingly hesitant to drop $70 on a new game. But another part, a huge part of the success of Helldivers, the PC market. If you factor out PC sales, Helldivers 2 would drop from the 7th highest grossing Sony published game in history to not even ranking in the top 20. It's been first in US monthly active users on Steam each month since launch. So this is all a huge slap in the face to a large and important section of your consumer base, Sony. Now, maybe the response to this from the community wouldn't have been quite so bad if this hadn't come right off the back of the most unpopular patch the game has yet to receive. This week started off poorly for Helldivers, and it ended catastrophically. This massive patch that released earlier in the week, it was delayed to this week. People were anticipating it because it was a patch larger in scope than we've had before, and the devs hyped it up as a patch that would be reworking 24 weapons and stratagems. And of course, many players hope to see lots of buffs to underperforming weapons. However, when people realized there were a lot more nerfs than they'd hoped for, well, the community got upset. Which is what normally happens when things get nerfed in any game. But it wasn't all nerfs. The Senator pistol was, I think, the big winner of the patch. It got a damage buff, and it got a new speed loader for when it's fully empty on ammo, which is apparently something that Spitz really pushed for. The devs also fixed an issue where the Sickle and the Quasar were unable to shoot through foliage. Those are great wins. The Diligence Counter Sniper has significantly better handling now, and it can now one-shot Devastators if you land a headshot. So after months of sniper rifles basically being terrible, we finally have one that feels great to use. But the best buff of them all, they added a menu option where you can disable automatic climbing and vaulting while sprinting, meaning I won't climb on top of the stupid supply drop every goddamn time now. Oh, and it's not just Helldivers that got buffed. You know Stalkers? Those invisible cloaky bugs that sneak up on you, but thankfully you can kind of see them in the distance because their cloak interacted oddly with the fog and actually made them more visible. Yeah, well, it turns out that interaction was not intended, and now with this patch, Stalkers are genuinely cloaked. You might see a slight shimmer like a cloaked unit in StarCraft, and they still cast shadows, but they are so much more difficult to spot now. But then on the nerf side, the Quasar got a significant nerf with its recharge time increased by 5 seconds. Lots of people were upset about this, but honestly, come on. We all knew the Quasar was OP when it was released. I've been enjoying it, knowing it would get nerfed, and this nerf does feel about right. Look, it went from being a clearly superior version of the EAT to now being an option that's still probably the best option in a lot of cases, but you know, it's still really strong. It doesn't use up a backpack slot, it has infinite ammo, you can use other guns and stratagems and do other things while you're waiting for its cooldown. You can shoot down objectives from 200 yards away, you can, or yards, meters, feet, whatever. You can close bug holes with it. It's the answer to dropships, it's the answer to gunships, it's the answer to just about every big enemy. It warranted a nerf. Then the Guard Dog Rover had its damage decreased by 30%, which, that sounds like a buff to me. That sounds like I'm taking 30% less damage from my teammates from now on. Goddamn Guard Rovers. Jeez. Literally the most terrifying thing in the game is when my allies get close to me with their freaking rovers. Then they inexplicably nerfed the crossbow. Who's even using the crossbow? I expected them to buff the crossbow. The dev said that they wanted the crossbow to be more of a single target tool against medium enemies, similar to the Scorcher, but we already have the Scorcher, and it's just better. Then they buffed Scout Striders. Now they're less vulnerable to explosions. I don't really know why, but okay. But the change that baffles me the most is that they increase the rate of patrols when there are fewer than 4 players. The fewer the players, the bigger the change, such that solo divers are now going to have 50% more patrols than they previously had. Now, apparently this wasn't intended as a nerf to us. The devs are just fixing some incorrect math, basically, because the patrols were not spawning as often as they had intended. The intent was for 1 player to have 1/4 the patrols of 4 players, but instead we were getting 1/6. And while that's nice and all, the result is basically still the same. It's still a nerf to solo play and to 2 players and 3-player play. And the devs did say they felt that high difficulty missions were too easy for solo and duo players. But I mean, here's the thing. Some people just want to play this game with friends, not with randoms. And you don't always have 3 friends online. They're not playing solo or with fewer people because they want a bigger challenge. They just want to enjoy the game with their buddies. It's already more challenging to play with fewer than 4 players. You're gonna have to artificially ramp up the difficulty even more. Then there was a patch note about bullets ricocheting back to us, and this led to some alarmism in the community, with footage allegedly showing rockets and explosives ricocheting back and taking out Helldivers. The devs came in and debunked that, thankfully, and confirmed that rockets and explosives are not ricocheting backwards. But overall, a lot of people were upset by this patch. You did see a tiny uptick in negative reviews, but that was completely eclipsed by the end of the week. And here's the thing, I don't think all of this is just players being unhappy about their toys getting nerfed, which again, you see all the time whenever any game gets nerfs. I think what this comes back to is the game's design and how it approaches difficulty. Rather than give enemies more health or make them deal more damage, which is what you would see in a lot of other games, the higher in difficulty you go, you encounter more enemies and more of the tougher enemies. And you just reach a point where only some of the tools that we have at our disposal can properly deal with all these tough enemies. So it's when these tools, the ones that we rely on to deal with these tough enemies, when these are nerfed, that's when it feels really bad. Especially when we're not given a new tool to make up for it. This happened before when we had the railgun nerfed. It was the answer to taking down the heavies, and it got nerfed, and people were upset, and now no one uses the railgun anymore. But then we got the Quasar, so everything was fine, and now the Quasar is getting nerfed. So how are we supposed to deal with multiple Bile Titans and Chargers all at the same time now? It just feels like they need to once again adjust the spawn rates of these big guys so that, you know, they don't, not to make the game easier, right? Just spawn more little guys and fewer of the big guys all at once. We have a ton of different tools to deal with large volume of small things. Now, along with this patch, we unlocked the Airburst rocket launcher, as everyone expected, and we also got a new mission type. Remember that termicide that we unleashed on planets to stop the bugs forever? That would totally not backfire. Well, it backfired. So we gotta go in now, shut down the termicide towers, which have gone all overgrown with bug goop and giant eggs. Big ol' eggs. I feel like this is foreshadowing those giant worm skeletons that we've seen on some planets. We're gonna have like big ol' sandworms. Just big ol' shy huluds as we reenact Dune. The devs also clarified that they've been working on a fix for the spear lock-on and hope to have it in the next patch. Then we got a reveal of a new warbond, Polar Patriots, releasing on May 9th. It includes new capes, new armor, although the armor just gets reused passive buffs, servo-assisted, fortified, and scout. Again, a little disappointed there that we're not getting any new perks. We're also getting a new pistol that's basically a Space Desert Eagle. Should pack a big punch. We're getting 3 new primaries, an assault rifle with a high damage but a smaller magazine size, a one-hander submachine gun with a slower rate of fire but concussive rounds, and a new energy-based gun that you can hold down the fire button to charge it up, and the longer you hold it down before you release, the more damage you're going to deal. So with the last warbond, we basically got the Eruptor, which was like a primary version of the autocannon. Now we're getting a primary version of the railgun. We're getting a new incendiary grenade that's going to explode on impact into a fire dot zone, and a new booster that seems like it's going to become a must-have for bug missions. If you are slowed by enemy attacks like bug puke, this booster will jolt you back into action. Then in Diablo news, we got the full reveal of Season 4 and the changes from PTR this week. The season starts again on May 14th, and you can check out my summary of the dev update right here. Some quick highlights though. Masterworking can't fail anymore. Barbarian Dust Devil spawn rate has been heavily nerfed. The pit has been made more challenging. Veiled crystal costs for imprinting are being reduced hugely. And we're also going to gain more veiled crystals by salvaging. Season 4 truly is Diablo 4's Loot 2.0 moment. For everyone who has been wondering if and when to come back to try the game again, this is the season. This is the moment. It took Diablo 3 2 years to do its massive overhaul patch that fixed the game. D4 did it in 10 months. But now this truly is make or break time. We do have a very minimal season theme that is basically just a story quest line with a bounty board that unlocks a ton of rewards to turbo boost our character's progress to level from 1 to 100. A lot of the community seems to be understanding and accepting of this, but some people kind of feel cheated out of a season theme. All I personally look for in a new season is a new experience, and we're getting that with all the changes coming to the base game. It doesn't matter to me whether it's seasonal or also available on Eternal Realm. In fact, I think it's actually better that we don't get any kind of borrowed power mechanic this season, because we still need to now understand what is our new baseline power, what is the new balance and meta without having some temporary mechanic on top of things. Now, some info that we didn't learn in the dev stream but could find in the patch notes. Items with greater affixes will have a new audio cue, so they're going to have a new unique icon on the ground, a new unique icon in your inventory, and that audio cue. I know people were asking for a different beam color, but remember, both unique items and legendary items both can roll with greater affixes, and they already have their own beam colors, so we would basically have to be adding 2 new beam colors. I mean, at some point we're just going to end up with a rainbow, making the game look garish, so I'd prefer to stick with what we have for now. See how that works with readability. Also, you can now spur your mounts in town. Gone are the speed limits. The popos will not catch you. The technology is here to make horses go fast in towns. Also, the minimum level at which you can equip sacred and ancestral gear has been lowered. You can equip sacreds now as of level 35 and ancestrals as of level 55. World boss health has been greatly increased in world tiers 3 and 4. So I guess they're going to die in 10 seconds instead of 5 seconds now. Given that we're also seeing a huge rise in player power this patch thanks to tempering, I feel like we need some system for world bosses that funnels players using top tier meta builds that insta-delete world bosses. We gotta funnel them into some kind of uber world boss fight, but also prevent players who are not running those builds, who can't handle an uber world boss, somehow prevent them from joining and just leeching. Because right now, world bosses are actually balanced just fine for average builds. But they're a joke for meta builds, and when you have the meta builds and the average builds in the same group, what happens is the world bosses just get deleted instantly. But once you take those overqualified players out of the world boss fights, then what remains is actually a challenge for other players. We're also now getting a visual indication to the imprint UI to indicate which legendary affixes are currently equipped. Also, you can now gamble ancestrals before level 73, and when you're level 100, the Opal vendor will give you exclusively item power 925 items. You can also now search your stash by item power. Also, channeling times for many things in the game have been cut down, thank goodness, and damage over time effects will no longer break channeling. When we're talking about channeling, we mean like channel to interact with something in the environment in order to do the quest objective, that kind of stuff. Glyph XP gains have been increased by 25%. That's 25% fewer nightmare dungeons they're going to have to run. We really will be wanting to spend all of our time in either Helltide or the Pit in Season 4. Then meanwhile, Wowhead has spotted an update on Blizzard's content distribution network that suggests that expansion news should be coming soon. The testing branch for the expansion Vessel of Hatred, used for internal testing, has been updated from an alpha version to a beta version. And this is lining up with what Diablo boss Rod Ferguson had said at BlizzCon 2023, that a big information reveal for Vessel of Hatred would likely happen in about 6 months from then. We are now just on the cusp of 6 months, but maybe the big Loot Reborn update has pushed things back. In fact, at this rate, I wouldn't be surprised if they save the announcement for another month. June 9th, which is when Xbox is holding their Xbox Games Showcase. Since there's no BlizzCon this year, which Blizzard has actually confirmed was a Blizzard decision, not a Microsoft decision, then the Xbox Games Showcase makes sense as a place to do a big reveal. After all, Diablo 4 has been killing it on Xbox ever since it came to Games Pass, It was one of the biggest first-party Game Pass launches ever. We also know that right after the Xbox Games Showcase, Microsoft is hosting the Redacted Direct, which will be a deep dive into the next installment of a beloved franchise. But this seems like it'll be for Call of Duty. We see the orange and black Black Ops color scheme. So while I would love for this to be Diablo, I don't think that's going to be the case. Then Gamescom in August will likely have a playable demo of Vessel of Hatred, maybe with a release date announcement at that point. Now, I thought that Loot Reborn would be the end of systems reworks for Diablo 4, but apparently the Diablo team may still be cooking. Lead producer Tim Ismay recently told Games Radar, quote, "We are for sure actively discussing, if not directly working on, additional systems we want to add to the game in the future, which we think will make it an even more robust experience, similar in scope to what we've been doing for Season 4 with itemization. We're very open to revisiting other parts of the game in the same way." Could he be alluding to a skill tree or skill system rework or expansion? Or maybe Paragon boards? Currently blue glyphs, for instance, serve absolutely no purpose. Then in a separate interview with PC Gamer, Joe Pipora suggested that they may make ladder boss farming more solo player friendly by not making it so rewarding to do the typical 4-man rotations we currently see. For those who don't know, the current meta tactic is that you get a party of 4 people, everyone has their own uber boss summoning materials, and then you just rotate through everyone. This way, everyone is basically getting 4 times the drop rates they would be getting if they'd be doing it solo, because you get drops from your materials and from everyone else's. Joe's proposed idea is to have the person who puts in the summoning materials be better rewarded than those who are just helping. So my own interpretation here would be maybe the person who puts in the materials has twice the odds of getting an Uber than the rest of the party. The effect would be it's not as punishing to not run this group meta. Oh, and speaking of Joe Pipora, I'll actually be interviewing him live on stream on Wednesday, May 8th at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. So do come by the stream, ask some questions. Oh, and for enjoyers of Diablo 2's Media XL Sigma mod, the new season launched yesterday. Full patch notes can be found in the description. Then this week I finished one of my playthroughs of No Rest for the Wicked. After taking my time to savor the game, smell the roses, I don't want to just blitz it and burn out instantly. And I'm really enjoying the game. And I'm looking forward to exploring more build options now. And I can't wait for the first big content update, which should bring new regions and co-op play. And I think that's going to come this summer. Creative director Thomas Mahler says that they're going to be working on Wicked for the next 5 to 10 years, which means plenty of content updates even past early access launch. He used the analogy that their 1.0 launch will be their Fellowship of the Ring, with much more to come after that. Quote, "This is our magnum opus. We always had lofty ambitions, and we said we're going to contribute in a huge way to the ARPG genre. And that is our intention." They also confirmed that there's a good chance we'll see a progress wipe at the 1.0 release, but they're not 100% sure yet. And I think it's a good idea, especially since multiplayer will be a thing. It just makes zero sense to have some people have an advantage over others. Just, zero everyone out. Everyone starts fresh. This way we can go through balance changes without fussing over, oh, now someone has this overpowered thing. What's going to happen when the game launches? Yada, yada. It's very common to see wipes from early access to launch in games in general. And it doesn't seem like they're exiting alpha anytime soon, so that gives us plenty of time to enjoy the game in the meantime. Learn speedrun strats so that when it releases, we'll be able to level up super fast, right? Now on April 26th, we got Hotfix 6, which introduced new torch items, which, along with giving us more light, also basically serve as a stat stick. We can hold on to that as an offhand item, and I think the strategy is you load it up with a bunch of buff spells. Basically just gives you access to more runes so that you can't fit on your main weapon. And after releasing 6 hotfixes in basically a week, the devs took some time, not time off, but some time to cook their next hotfix, which turned out to be a full-on patch 1. Their most significant update yet. They released that last night. I haven't had a chance to fully dive in, but I've gone through the patch notes. And it's bigger and contains more changes than ever. Of course, more performance improvements have come along. And now they've reached a point where they made so many performance improvements that they've actually lowered their recommended PC specs by a significant degree. They previously recommended a 30x card, now it's a 20x card. Then one of the bigger changes involved what loot goes into the inventory categories, so they're switching it up Now you have a gear tab, a consumables tab, a resources tab, and a food items tab. So food and consumables are now separated. They're not going to be lumped into the same tab. We also got an increase in chest stash space. Seems to be about 50% more stash space in every chest now across the board. And in the future, they also plan on having stacks inside of chests have basically infinite sizes. So if you're holding it on your character, it's still going to have a limit of like 25, but then the stack size in the chest could be like 999, for instance. That's for the future, though. We don't have that yet. But man, is that going to help us reach a point where our homes are not going to just look like chest warehouses. I do want to at some point make my house look pretty, but for now I'm a giant hoarder and it's a chest warehouse. With this patch, housing now unlocks as soon as you reach Sacrament, the town, rather than once you've completed a significant story milestone. I got mixed feelings about this. Narratively, I liked that we earned our house. I think it happened at the perfect time. It felt really good. But from a gameplay perspective, we really needed to stash all of our crap somewhere. And I'd hope that they would find a solution that would allow us to store maybe more of our stuff in the Rookery or some other temporary place and still be able to get that nice feeling of earning a house eventually. Also, since houses are a little pricey early on, they added a new cheap house that you can buy for 8 silver, which should be more affordable right at the start of the game. Then vendors, crafting tables, and refineries now have access to our stash, meaning we don't have to go to our stash, grab our things, go to the vendor. From the vendor and the crafting table and the refinery, you can just open up your chest and teleport it into your hands, which is fantastic quality of life. Having to go back and forth and back and forth, I spent so much time doing that. Then a lot of players were asking for dedicated bow builds to play out an archer archetype, an archer fantasy. Previously, bows could only be used as active bow powers, basically. So it consumes focus. So if you're out of focus, you can't use your bow. You need to either pop a focus potion or you need to use your melee to generate focus. It seems the intended cadence of the game is you use generator attacks and then your spender attacks. Meaning you just couldn't do a pure bow build. But now with this patch, they are trying temporarily to see how dedicated bow play works by shifting the resource that bows will consume from focus to instead stamina. This allows true archer playstyle to become possible. Again, though, this is a test. I can see that their concern is that this is going to imbalance the game when you're able to just not get close to enemies and avoid all the mechanics and just peg them with arrows or spells for that matter. I can see that kind of being counter to their game design. But if the test is successful, they plan to do the same thing with mages, so there is that. My main playthrough was with a mage build. Early levels were very rough, having to generate focus with melee attacks, and only occasionally popping off spells. But as you get more powerful, focus potions become more affordable, you get more gear that helps you generate more focus more easily, and then I just became a god. However, with this patch, it seems the OP meta mage builds got a huge nerf. First off, focus vials have been gutted in half. 50% nerf to focus potions. And basically, a big part of the meta, kind of regardless of what build you're on, is just focus potion spam and always cast your abilities. So I wonder how much this is really going to affect that. It should at least help the situation. Then the enchantment that gives you back focus when you deal damage got nerfed. The focus cost on elemental throw was increased, and the intelligence scaling on stabs was nerfed as well. So this all culminates into a huge nerf to both the sustain and the damage output of mages. But this is what early access is for, right? Balancing. The intended playstyle isn't to just stack a series of items and consumables such that you don't have to manage focus or interact with any enemy mechanics, because everything is just dead before it can even touch you. That's not the kind of game they wanted to make. And along those lines, another build type that got nerfed was the rapid attacking melee builds. The enchantment that grants health on damage dealt was nerfed. Basically, you'd have these fast attacking dagger builds that would trigger this so often they can just easily sustain max life by just instantly replenishing their life. And again, just ignore enemy mechanics. So it's a good nerf for the balance of the game. But man, do these nerfs hurt. Another massive nerf to everyone's playstyle is the removal of refined resources from vendors. The devs want us to engage with the systems for refining resources into crafting materials. But I can see this being probably the most unpopular change being made. And I think the issue here is that refining resources is so time consuming. The refining processes are time gated. People just don't want to have to wait 30 minutes for their resource to be done. So I feel like we either need to get some way to bring down those refining or crafting times, or let us keep buying the resources straight up at a premium cost. Jack up those prices, right? So it's either wait 30 minutes or spend a huge amount of your money. And then players can decide, well, is it more worth my time to go spend those 30 minutes farming back up currency or what? We also got keyboard control remapping with this patch, which is a big win. And I'll say a couple final pieces of feedback while we're on the topic, based on my experience so far. So I think it's awesome that we have so many different types of weapons, each with their own move sets, each or a lot of them with their own innate runes, i.e. powers. These all allow for a variety of different playstyles. And we also have a variety of different armors, not just light, medium, heavy, but even within those categories we have different armor types. But it feels as though there's lost opportunity with the armor, as it doesn't feel like there's so much to meaningfully distinguish between these different armor types. Whereas with the weapons, it feels like there's really a lot that meaningfully distinguishes them. Right now, it's basically just kind of how much they weigh and how much armor they provide is the main thing. It would be cool if there was something else. Maybe different armor types had different implicit affixes, like here's a suit of light armor that gives you some bonus to sneaking, like it reduces your threat range. Here's a light suit of armor that gives you a small move speed buff. Here's a suit of heavy armor that like massively increases your poise. Here's a suit of heavy armor that just reduces all damage you take by 10. I don't know, just spitballing random ideas here. Just more that gives identity between these different armor sets within the same weight class. Also, speaking of how build-defining weapons are, it feels like we do need a more deterministic way to get the weapon type that we want in order to run a given build. I've heard stories of it taking people forever to find the weapon they wanted to run for the build that they wanted to try out, and I'm not talking about like best in slot weapons here, just, you know, basic versions of like, you know, I want a spear, period. Just to try out, you know, that spear playstyle. Also, I think it would be more interesting if all the base attributes did something. So like you have health, stamina, focus, equip load. These all have universal utility no matter what build you're on. But then you have strength, dex, intelligence, and faith, and they're just damage stats depending on what weapon you're using. So like if you're a staff wielder, intelligence buffs your damage, but strength, dex, and faith does absolutely nothing for you. So you never have any reason to put any points into that. And so this seems like it's leading to a meta where people basically just dump most of their points into their damage stat. We did just get that nerf to staffs and intelligence, so we'll see how that pans out. But it could be interesting if, you know, maybe strength gave you armor. Maybe dex gave you move speed. Maybe intelligence gave you focus regen. Maybe faith gave you resistance. I don't know. Again, just random ideas here, but there's something to encourage us to spread out our points a little bit differently and invest into things that currently do nothing for us. Would allow maybe for different ways to build the characters. But my concern with attributes is always the Diablo 2 situation where, well, it's always a solved meta. It's the illusion of choice. Really, all you do is what is my, you know, minimum requirements to equip my gear, and then everything into vitality. But I don't know, what do you folks think? Those of you who've been playing the game, what are your ideas? Sound off in the comments, because that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discuss why canceling BlizzCon can actually be a good thing. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.